Hello, everyone. We're going to continue picking up from our book called African American History. We're going to read pages 42 and 43. And remember, we're working on fluency. That means reading with ease and accuracy. The Civil Rights Era, Brown versus Board of Education. Ever since Homer Plessy lost his Supreme Court case, Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, separate but equal had been the law of the land. In 1954, a team of NAACP lawyers, led by Thurgood Marshall, see page 36, argued against racial segregation. In Brown versus Board of Education, they called on the Supreme Court to hear their case. On May 17, the High Court ruled in their favor by declaring that segregation or separation of the races violated the Constitution. The justices ruled that schools, libraries, and other public buildings should be integrated with all deliberate speed, but they did not explain how integration should be carried out, and many states chose to move slowly or not at all. Emmett Till. Whites responded to the High Court's ruling in Brown versus Board of Education with violence throughout the South, and especially in Mississippi. While visiting relatives there in August 1955, Emmett Till, a black teenager, was abducted and killed by two white men. They had accused Till, 14, of flirting with a white woman. A photo of his body was published in Jet magazine, enabling black Americans from all over the country to see the damage his killers had done. Emmett's funeral in his hometown of Chicago attracted thousands. His death motivated many people to support the civil rights movement through donations to the NAACP and other groups. Back in Mississippi, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam were placed on trial for Emmett's murder. The trial lasted 5 days and included testimony from witnesses who had seen the two men with Emmett during the last hours of his life. After considering the evidence for little more than an hour, a jury found them not guilty. Mamie Till Bradley, Emmett's mother, traveled around the country to tell her son's story and speak out against injustice. Many years later, Carolyn Bryant, the woman who had accused Emmett, admitted that she had lied. Get to know James Baldwin. One of the best known American writers of the 20th century, James Baldwin climbed to fame just as the civil rights movement began in earnest. Born in Harlem, New York, he first caught the attention of readers with his 1953 novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain. In 1955, he published Notes of a Native Son, a collection of essays. In that book and others, such as The Fire Next Time, he established himself as an inventive thinker and a fearless voice on matters of race and civil rights. A gifted speaker and debater, he also wrote plays, poems, and screenplays. Baldwin spent much of his career writing and living in other countries, including France, Switzerland, and Turkey. Page 43. Montgomery bus boycott. Even after the Supreme Court ruled against segregation in 1954, life for African Americans remained unchanged in many parts of the South. Schools, libraries, churches, movie theaters, and water fountains were some of the places where blacks and whites were commonly separated. But there were many others, including city buses. In Montgomery, Alabama, 40,000 black residents rode the buses daily, paying a 10-cent fare. Far fewer whites rode the bus, about 12,000 in all. Yet black riders had to surrender their seats to whites and could only sit in the back of the bus. When white riders came aboard, African Americans were forced to get off the bus and re-enter through the back door. An English professor named Joanne Robinson had been forced to move to the back of the bus in 1949. The driver yelled at her and raised his hand as if he were about to hit her. Robinson became so upset that she got up and ran off the bus, leaving her packages behind. She never forgot the experience. And in 1953, she began to plan a citywide bus boycott. A boycott is a form of protest in which people refuse to buy or pay for certain goods and services because they believe they have been treated unfairly. Robinson and other activists waited for the right moment. It came in 1955 when a seamstress and NAACP or NAACP official named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white rider. Parks was arrested and taken to city jail. Earlier that year, a young black woman named Claudette Cloven had been arrested and convicted for the same offense. Following Parks' arrest, Joanne Robinson printed 35,000 flyers calling for a boycott of Parks' trial. Calling for a boycott to begin on Monday, December the 5th, the day of Parks' trial. Parks was found guilty of violating the segregation laws. She was required to pay a $10 fine and $4 in court fees. That afternoon, the boycott's leaders formed a new group, the Montgomery Improvement Association. Its president was a minister who had recently moved to town. His name was Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Under King's leadership, the Montgomery bus boycott continued for 13 months. To help raise money, Reverend King traveled across the country to talk about the campaign for justice. In Montgomery, on November the 13th, 1956, the Supreme Court declared segregated buses unconstitutional. In December, the boycott officially ended as black residents once again boarded city buses to go to work. The boycott's success inspired black people across the country to launch similar demonstrations for justice and equality. All right, the time that is on my phone is 7:42. Now it's 7:46, but we finished. We did it. I did make a couple of mistakes, and I don't have the best posture, but I kept reading, and I think I tried to read with enthusiasm and a little bit of character. So thank you so much for listening and reading along with me, or listening or reading along with me, I should say. And stay tuned for tomorrow. To the next day's read, we'll be reading pages 44 and 45 of A Child's Introduction to African American History.